Hey, so I'm just back from LGB Alliance conference, and obviously the Philly has been on this weekend, but we just got this consultation, I think, that came out perhaps on Friday, which is the interim service specifications for specialist gender dysphoria services for children and young people, with an opportunity for you to give your views, which I'm going to encourage you to. And I thought I definitely want to weigh in, obviously, because this is my background. Not many people have, and it could be because the conferences have been on, but it could be because it's actually pretty complicated and you're not actually sure what to think about it. So I'm going to offer you some of my insights, because this is very much my clinical area, having written a number of these types of documents and set up a lot of services. I have a lot of opinions about the ins and outs of this. I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to make this, pizzazzy, exciting, interesting. It's going to be a bit boring. However, I think, I hope that you find my opinion of some value. On both sides of the fence, there is obviously a real juxtaposition in terms of, real distress, which I'll show you some of those opinions, and then, real delight. Although on Twitter, really not that many people talking about it. So I kind of started off the wrong way round, and I had both of incredible annoyance, and then I had a kind of sense of, oh yeah, okay, this is really good. So I'm going to walk you through some of those different feelings and why I had them, and point out some of the relevant things that I think that we should be concerned about, and also the things that I think we should be, that are really, really positive as we go along. Now, one of the things we're always battling about is language, and it is really, people really fall on both sides of the fence, and I can understand the arguments perfectly well. But for the purposes of this discussion, I want you to imagine yourself being a clinician sitting in front of a patient, having this discussion, and you've put aside all of those different sitting in conferences with everyone clapping one another going, we really need to see, other people's point of view and have respectful disagreement, okay? You're literally got a patient in front of you, and you've set this service has been set up, and you're sitting and you're now implementing this. And we're turning to the back of the appendices, and we've got the DSM-5 criteria for gender dysphoria, if I can find it, in front of us, and we're going to now look and see whether this patient actually has gender dysphoria. Hi, okay, yeah, thanks for coming today. Okay, so we just need to try and decipher, decide whether or not you have gender dysphoria. So we're just going to work through some of the criteria, and see whether this applies to you. So tell me a little bit about your story. Okay, right. So some of the things I just want to ask you, do you have a strong preference for playmates of the other gender? Do you have a strong preference for the toys, games or activities stereotypically used or engaged in by the other gender? Do you have a strong preference for cross-gender roles in make-believe play or fantasy play? Do you like cross-dressing or simulating female, putting on female clothes? The DSM-5 recognises, it says here, defines gender dysphoria in children as a marked incongruence between one's experience, expressed gender, and natal sex, lasting at least 6 months, as manifested by at least 6 of the following, one of which must be the first criteria, which is a strong desire to be of the other gender, or an insistence that one is the other gender or some alternative gender different to one's natal sex. So I started off with the tendering part, which is, I wish I'd actually done it the other way around, because I would have been in a much better mood, because this part is the horrific thing that was written by someone probably just, straight off a master's course. Now, the point of these two documents, right, is we're no longer being academic, we're no longer being ontological, we're no longer at a conference, we're no longer chatting with our mates, we're no longer inviting them round for dinner, right? We're no longer being friendly, we're no longer talking about toilets. We're no longer talking about stuff where people are making allowances and talking about things they're willing to do and having friendly, disagreements and all the things that I hear sort of all the time where people are compromises, right? This is you reaping what you're sowed, right? Patients sitting in front of clinicians literally accessing treatment now, because all of those tiny little points at which you validated their language all the way along are now sitting in these documents right here, right now. Okay, you've paid for these and they're being delivered for you in a package. This is your present right now. And now you've got clinicians, right, who have to work on science and fact and research methodology and epidemiology and things that actually happen, having to work with magic, right, and witchcraft and wizardry. And how are they going to do it? I actually do not fathom how this is going to work, right? So in the first sentence, in the first paragraph, in 5 summary in the specialist service for children and young people with gender dysphoria, we have: the service will adopt an integrated approach to assessing and responding to an individual's needs in view of the range of co-presentations, blah, 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 and range of complexity relating to gender identity. My hair's just flown back in my head. So already, as a clinician, I'm thinking, whoa, how are we going to do that? Magical thinking. So I'm already thinking, well, this doesn't make sense. How am I going to work out that, right? So I'm having to think. So we've got, 130 odd magical gender identities that we're going to have to pretend exist. So further on, we've got children and young people will engage with a care pathway which offers brief guidance and referral service to professionals through some kind of initial consultation and then an ongoing consultation, advice and liaison. So that I've got a query against what that means, because I'm thinking that there's going to be some kind of triaging system, but I'm interested as to what that would comprise and who's going to do that and what this is going to look like. Because the thing with some kind of tendering documentation is that I would really like to see a little bit more meat on the bones of this, even at this point, because that actually hides a lot of information in that, because there could be anything hidden in there. Who's going to do that? What's that going to look like? Because given that we're talking about all of the different confounding factors, a multitude of presentation, people could either be, in or out at that point. When I do my feedback, I'm definitely going to include some comments about this, why they're starting off from the foundation of using already accepting these terms. I mean, it shows you how quickly they've come into common parlance. It wasn't really that long ago where we did this little swap from gender identity to gender incongruence, and it was done very purposefully, of course, to take a sidestep away from the negativity associated with gender identity ideology and where it came from. And of course it's been embedded here, and then we also have this language of assigned sex, and why we've got medical professionals agreeing to this and putting it within the documentation at this stage. I find this really, really abhorrent, and I'm really, really concerned about that. I am concerned about this cut-off at 18. I mean, obviously this is how the NHS works in terms of paediatrics and adults, but we've also got this backlog of around 13,000 patients who are sitting in the system. So you can absolutely be clear that all of those slightly older adolescents will basically just be, they'll be waiting for them to just be spat out into the adult system. One of the things that I was really, really pleased to see, it's just come to my mind and I can't remember exactly where I saw it now, but the existing caseload or the existing waiting list of patients who were put onto that pathway, onto that waiting list, but they weren't put on it by some kind of medical professional. So say they were put on by mermaids or some kind of voluntary sector organisation, they were not going to be recognised as a valid referral. Yay. So in 7.1 in the service aims, we've got this: screen and triage those on the waiting list and all new referrals to determine the most suitable clinical pathway. Okay, so say you've got say we've got 13,000. What does screen mean? What does that look like? Given the complexity of the mental health issues and presenting compounding factors that we know about, how are they going to screen? So are they going to take out, how are they going to put those down a channel? Because that's a lot of clinical hours. They're not going to present with one different issues. They're probably going to have a multitude of different things like, self-harm, depression, anxiety, ASD, body issues, etc., etc. Who's going to be doing that? Because on the positive side, one of the things that people are excited about, some people are excited about, is the fact that this has come under a medical management. But the reason that it's a positive thing, essentially what it means is it's about accountability, and it's just the way that the NHS works. However, one of the things with this concept of multidisciplinary teams, and I know it sounds really fantastic and fluffy and wonderful and magical, and you've got this, you could conjure up this fantasy of a whole load of people sitting around in a room going, oh wow, hi social worker, oh you specialist nurse, oh psychiatrist, and this is all lovely, and we just go through all the different patients and everyone has a chat and we all go, oh no, I think it's probably this, oh no, oh that's a good idea, okay great, that's a nice package of care for that person. Ultimately, that only really happens in tiny proportion of very, very specialised units, where you have highly problematized patients. I want to keep going, but I can't. I should have started on the other one so you could go, oh yeah, she's really happy, before I went down the negative road. So one of the most important things that's missing, and really does need to be acknowledged in a really explicit way, and I think it's really important to put into the consultation, is that until the capture is dealt with, then this is all just going to be meaningless, because this is not like a negative balance where all of these healthcare professionals are just sitting around waiting to go, yeah, okay, well we really don't believe that you've got that you are the opposite sex, and we are going to really seriously deal with the diagnostic overshadowing of gender, and we think that this is actually down to your suicidality is down to your autism, for example, and clearly you're self-harming, or and your eating disorders, or your father died, and blah 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 blah, and all the other different issues that young people are going to bring to the table, because these are still highly captured healthcare professionals. So until the professional bodies are dealt with, and there's no mention of the professional bodies in here, their responsibilities and what's going to be done about that, because there's a lot of woolliness, and there's a lot of real detail lost in some of the words here. So whilst I was like, okay, I did like a lot of this, and this equality impact assessment, this actually is a bit of a ruse, because it's not actually about EDI stuff. It actually comes from a basis of, because public health was actually using this type of language way before EDI started banging on about it. But so the first thing I want to say about the clinical team, right, is I'm happy to think, yeah, this sounds good. But what I really want to know is at what point is the door going to be absolutely slammed shut, right, on the lobbyists, because they're already circling, and I already know of some situations where they're trying to get in, okay, because they're already in, obviously, in other situations, because they're already working in clinical arenas, in sexual health services, for example, where gender clinics are running with regard to adult services. So I think it would be really good to know how they're going to shut the door on them in terms of these younger people. There's loads of little bits. I could go on all day about little things that worry me. Where young people don't meet the criteria, they will be advised of other resources for support that are appropriate for individual needs. Okay, well, at the moment we know that other resources are one of the most scary places, and that tends to look like, full-on social transition. I love this part though. The current service specification, I did say this earlier, the current service specification for GID states that referrals can be made by staff in health and social services, schools, colleges and further education, and by voluntary organisations. But the new service specification proposes that referrals may be made by GPs and NHS professionals, and also that they want to go through the back catalogue and look at who they are. However, NHS professionals, school nurses are NHS professionals, so I'd like to see that doesn't include them. Sorry, school nurses, but I'm not going to be trusting you now, knowing what I know about the level of capture and how you've been working with Mermaid, Stonewall and all the rest of it. Sorry, kill me. Importantly, they have this part, social transition. The interim service specification sets out more clearly that the clinical approach in regards to prepubertal children will reflect evidence that in most cases gender incongruence does not persist into adolescence, and that for adolescents the provision of approaches for social transition should only be considered where the approach is necessary for the alleviation of or prevention of clinically significant distress or significant impairment in social functioning, and the young person is able to fully comprehend the implications of affirming a social transition. So this is the bit that we need to act up in terms of schools, and we need to deliver that in a fully comprehensive way and use to our advantage in terms of ensuring that they know that when we've already told them that Hilary Cass said that a social transition is an active intervention, but we need to absolutely double down on that and ensure that they need to stop doing what they're doing. This was really important and very, very welcome. Unregulated sources of puberty blocking drugs will not be tolerated, and that the NHS is not going to take responsibility for it. This is absolutely vital. Delighted to see that. This part, all good and very, very good. So under the section, main potential positive or adverse impact of the proposal for protected characteristic groups summarised. Under the section gender reassignment, not all children and young people who will be impacted by the proposals are likely to share this protected characteristic. Now this is worthy of spending a bit of time on. Children and young people who are on the waiting list for GIDS or who may be referred to a Phase 1 service in the future, or who are receiving an assessment by GIDS and who are without a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, do not share the protected characteristic of gender assignment as a class or a cohort of patients, because of course they cannot be treated as proposing to undergo a process or part of a process for the purpose of reassigning their sex by changing blah blah blah. To apply such a definition to these individuals is to make assumptions upon the aims and intentions of those referred, the certainty of those desires and their outward manifestation, and upon the appropriate treatment that may be offered and accepted in due course. Well, look, that's good clarification too, because clearly what they're saying is, you're presupposing the outcome and a diagnosis, and therefore, we can't allow that. But that's also helpful for us in terms of schools work, because, They're saying, you know, you're not going to be falling under the protected characteristic group for those purposes, and it's a lever. So go and read this section and see what you think. I'll put the links in the underneath. Read through all of these documents. Please, please, please complete the consultation with as much feedback and commentary as you can. I seriously think that this is the point, and I'm sorry to all of you who are absolutely done in with the whole language argument is so infuriating. But genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, every single time I have an argument with a school, write a complaint, or now, as I'm telling you, with my clinician hat on, you're sitting in front of a patient. Every single time you have written a report or you have used the words gender identity, which is a totally and utterly meaningless term of made-up fantasy, you're now asking a clinician to sit in front of a patient and talk nonsense with them and to try and sort out their deepest, darkest, most upsetting trauma, difficulty, and try and make some sense out of it, and try and patch them back together. And all of that is still being formed on the basis of you not wanting to be clear and to just, you know, have the difficult conversations. And it really, really isn't about having respectful disagreement anymore. We need science, please. You're not helping us have science. We need you to help the clinicians to go forward, right? We need to help them. They're not going to be able to get rid of the capture, right? If you're writing reports and you're lobbying on policy and you're doing the tweets and you're writing the letters to MPs, but you're using the language because this is what you have produced. You have literally produced all of this by the stuff that you have continued to talk about. Every time you've used this language, you've now produced clinical material, service specification, service tendering documents with captured language that is absolute meaningless nonsense based on magical thinking. In amongst are some good things, yes, which have some positive benefits, but it's still a quagmire of mud, and it could have been even better. That's my summary. This could have been even better, but it's been made worse by people who have gone along with it, and now the reality is, unfortunately, because the capture of all of the professional bodies is so bad, that what they're now going to do is they're going to recruit staff for these jobs, and they're just going to trot in, and they're all going to be fully captured. And I'm very sad to say, I think that they're going to struggle to do what your fantasy is that they're going to do. But you know, I'm going to try and be positive, and I'm going to really encourage you to do as much of the consultation as you can and go through it with a fine-tooth comb. That's just my view. You can obviously completely disagree with me, and I hope that's helpful.